even for very seasoned leaders, they were like, this had never happened before. They were surprised by this.
Hi, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you are here today. Today, my guest is Marlene Linzner-Scherf. She's an Austrian who has started a recent coaching practice. She also is big in brand experience and digital strategy, crisis communication. And I brought her on the show today because she did a very brave thing. She took a step back from leadership. She was in a leadership role, thrown at it at a young age, and she wasn't finding happiness and satisfaction in it. And she changed her entire life by taking a step backwards. I wanted to share this with you today because we as leaders sometimes maybe dream about doing that, but we don't want to give up the influence or the pay cut, or we're worried about what people will think of us if we take a step back. And so many powerful things can do it when you listen to your heart. So I wanted to bring Marlena on to share her experience. She is just a magical human being, and I'm so glad I met her. And I just know you're going to love this podcast. She is the founder of Ripe Consulting. That is her brand experience, digital strategy, and coaching business. She lives in the Netherlands, but it was in Norway when we recorded this podcast. You're going to love it. She's great and very inspirational. I know you'll walk away with the courage to take a risk in your life and leadership. Listen to your heart, listen to your gut. Hang tight, and I'll be right back with Marlena. All right, everyone. I am back with my guest, Marlene Linzner-Scherf. Marlena, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be part of the fabulous guests you already had on the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad you reached out. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about who you are and why you wanted to come on the show.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm Marlene, and I am a digital brand and communications consultant, but I'm also a mentor and coach. And when I listened to a couple of your episodes and also the title Reflect Forward, I thought that what I do might fit quite well into what you also put on the show. There's this one quote from this Danish philosopher that says that basically life has to be lived forward, but can only be understood looking backwards. And I thought that was what also resonated with me quite a bit. And I really try to live my life like that, but also encourage my clients and my business partners to think about their challenges and their opportunities in that way.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about why you went into coaching, because you have a little bit of a unique story here. So can you talk about why you wanted to be a coach and how you specifically help people?
Yeah, I think I had a very interesting relationship and journey with leadership overall. I was, of course, like so many other young, ambitious people, I was just thrown into a leadership role. No training, no nothing, just go figure it out, right? You're smart, you will manage. But I had some very special experiences when I was starting to lead teams, especially when I was leading my first team. It was really that I was just like 2 weeks in, and I went to the office, and suddenly I came to an office that was empty. And I didn't know what was going on, but it turned out that my whole team had called in sick. And so I was there and I was supposed to lead this team, but there was no team to lead. And of course, this was not just the one thing, but there was also like, you have work to do, right? So you have potentially clients to work on. And suddenly this turned a little bit into a crisis. And as I said, I was only a few weeks in. So I was also navigating the whole new scene. And luckily, I had a strong background in crisis communications. I was able to take the crisis and get it under control. But then, of course, I still had to figure out how do we move forward from what happened, because not a lot of companies are actually prepared for the fact that what if nobody showing up is the actual crisis, right? What do you do
Mhm.
then? I took the approach that I also wanted to talk to my team one by one and just find out what was going on with them, even though I thought it was weird that this happened all at the same time. I just wanted to also listen to them and find out what was going on with them. And what I learned by speaking to them was that they just felt lost and burned out because they hadn't been led properly before. And there was just no one there caring. They just didn't know what was expected from them. It was very touching. And I could only find this out by listening and by digging a little bit deeper and making sure I do not finger point, because of course it's easy to let your emotions take over and just jump to conclusions. And I think this was really tough for me back at that time where it happened, because I was very young. It was one of my first leadership roles. And this eventually also added on to the feeling that I have a big responsibility over people. And this is also why I then decided eventually to step back from leadership, because I thought, hey, I need to figure out some things myself first, because you are responsible for people, and not just that they show up and that you mentor them, but also you are responsible to develop them, to create opportunities for them. And I think at that age where I was thrown into this position, that was a little bit too much for me. And I was like, I cannot do it. Like, my expectations towards myself were also too high. So I had to step back from that. And that's when I went also a little bit on the coaching journey to improve on that.
Was it coordinated? Did everybody like plan to not show up or was everybody really legitimately sick?
I don't know, and I didn't ask. So
Okay.
I'm still curious to this day what exactly happened and how it worked. But I also thought, if I ask this question, I'm not going to get to the right answers in that sense. So do I rather want to know this, or do I want to know like the things that help us move forward? So I have to say, I never really ask.
Ah, I don't know that I could have stopped myself from doing that, going, okay, really? The whole team doesn't show up? Like, what is going on? This totally resonates with me. And this is why I wanted you to come on the show, because being a young leader, being thrown into a leadership position like that, that's what happened to me. I was 28 when I took over for the founders at Stone Age, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I appreciate the place that you were at, where, okay, I have to go figure this out and I don't know what to do. In my case, a lot of people questioned, why did the founders hire this young person who has no industry experience to come in and lead us? In fact, I had several people who said, I don't work for you. I work for John and Jerry, the founders, in those early days. And it was really tough. So what did you do? Like, how, so you asked a bunch of questions and started to understand what was going on with each of them as individuals. Were you able to turn things around with the team?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to turn things around with them, because it was a very special situation in the company that this team was placed in. So they were almost a little bit detached, like their own little universe in that sense,
Mhm.
which was also, in hindsight, the blessing that we had, because we could operate a little bit to our own rules that we were making ourselves. And I think that was then also what helped us getting out of there. I luckily managed to establish a good relationship with most of them. And of course, I learned different facets of leadership. So, of course, you have people who don't really care about the job. And then you have people that are so ambitious. And then you have people that have so much potential and you see it and they don't care. They just want to paint and do art, right? There's just all these different flavors that where I also learned a lot. But I think we started really to have open communication, and also there was no real structure in place, and that safe space had not been created yet. So it was really about gaining that trust of the people, saying, hey, I'm here to also support you. We all want to do, in that sense, a good job. And this is where you could develop, or this is where you could improve. And it was also, I think, the biggest chunk that I did was the listening part. Because since they were a little bit closed off in that company, they didn't have the feeling that anybody really cared or would communicate their messages to even higher up leadership. That it didn't feel like they had a team captain. This is what we luckily were able to establish through some workshop sessions and through being honest with each other. And I was lucky enough to have that team, even though they were all sick in that second week, that they were able to participate and they wanted to participate. And in all honesty, just a few weeks ago, one of those former team members reached out to me and asked me for advice on their next career step. So it turned out to be one of those things that, like, a crisis brings people together in that sense, where then later on the people would still respect each other and even come back and ask for advice. That was also for me a very beautiful moment to have that person come back and ask for something.
Absolutely. It's an testament to the relationship that you built. So, this is your first leadership position. You've had background in communication and crisis communication in particular. How did you know that you were supposed to do these things? I remember having to just trust my gut on so many of those decisions I was making early on and still today. We're facing all kinds of challenges that we haven't faced before, and you have to pull from experience. But being so young and relatively inexperienced, how did you know this is what you should be doing? Is it something that you learned, something you read, something your gut?
It was mostly the gut. And what I realized at that time was that maybe I hadn't had like a structural leadership experience in that sense. But I was also thinking back and I saw that people sometimes rally around me, or I was like always class president. Why would I be always class president? Those things didn't make sense until that moment. But a lot of it was also gut feeling and also how I want to be treated. I think that's really the opportunity that you have there, because I know I've made mistakes and I know I
Mhm.
made decisions too fast and wished I could have taken them back or made a different one. So I think it was also looking at it with a little bit of kindness and understanding. But most of it, I think it was really my gut, because there was a certain amount of support available. But that was a situation nobody had experienced before. Even for very seasoned leaders, they were like, this had never happened before. They were surprised by this. So, yeah, it was mostly the gut thing. And I think what I also realized back then was maybe leadership is not necessarily about seniority or being the most
Mhm.
experienced or the oldest person in the room. But at that moment, I knew we had to deal with a crisis. And I said, this is the way forward. And I just made a decision. And I wasn't the most senior person in the room, but I was the one that was saying, this is the right way and follow me. I had this urge to do something because I knew that just sitting around and watch how it will play out eventually, that doesn't solve anything. So I really
Mhm.
had this urge also to stand up and do something about it.
I love that. I recently just did a podcast a couple of weeks ago on the difference between confidence and self esteem. And this really came from you exhibiting confidence, even being relatively young, knowing I'm sure that this is what I should do. Where did that confidence come from, especially without having a lot of experience?
I think that was really the crisis communication background, right? So if
Yeah.
I think if you have solved a few really big issues for clients or personalities in that sense, then you also know that you just also need to get a hold of the narrative. And that's what I was trying to do. So I think it was also the professional background, like the book smart helped me then in that sense to like work with the soft skills and develop those.
Do you have a process? I mean, having training and done a lot of work in crisis communication, what advice do you have for leaders who might be facing a crisis that they have to lean into? What are three things that they could do today for crisis management?
I think they should, first of all, they should be prepared, right? So they should not think that no crisis is going to happen. Then they should really understand where the crisis can come from, because the biggest crisis that I have seen playing out come from the place where you expected it least. You usually think about external or bad PR, but that's not always the case. Most of the time, it's a very small thing that you didn't expect to blow up that then becomes this big thing you need to manage. And then I think what is super, super important, my third point would be to be as transparent as you can. That doesn't mean that you have to say everything all the time. But I think if you are transparent and if you choose transparent words that really also build a connection with the people affected, then you have a good ground to take this further. Those are also a lot of things that I see mistakes in the beginning, to not have this backbone communication. And then the further the crisis gets, the more it gets tied up in each other. And that's usually how I observe it, also looking at crisis all around me.
This reminds me back in 2020 when we got hacked. Stone Age was hacked by a ransomware attack. I was out for a run on Saturday morning, not thinking at all that a crisis was going to happen. I never thought it would be a ransomware attack because I had lulled myself into thinking that we're just some small company in rural Colorado. Why would anybody mess with us? I have since learned that is incorrect thinking. So then it was like, what do we do? When I had to pull all my employees together to tell them what had happened, I committed to being fully transparent. I knew it was going to be really hard for people to hear. We don't know. There's
Yeah.
lots of things that we don't know, and this is going to have to play out, but we're going to do three things. We are going to be completely transparent. What I know, you will know. If I can't share something, I will tell you why I can't share it. Our customers can't feel a thing. We're going to come together and we're going to come up with a process to ship everything manually so that our customers who rely on us in the busiest time of the year right now can trust that we've got their back and we're doing everything we can to not pay that ransom. And that kind of confident communication, even in all of the unknown, it was such a scary situation. What does this mean for the business? Are we going to survive? I think it really helped people stay calm. And it was all based on transparency, a clear goal of this is what we're going to do. And we're always going to be transparent. And we came out of it such a much stronger company than we would have if we never would have had to go through that crisis. But it was crazy, man. You have to communicate with lawyers and your customers and your suppliers and your business software company. And there's just so many moving pieces that you have
Yeah,
to manage in a crisis like that.
for sure. But it is the best team building exercise because if you really manage to get everyone in the same boat, you're fine.
Yeah, I agree. Now let's dive into taking a step back because
Yeah.
this is very unusual. I can imagine taking a step back when I'm like ready to not be a CEO anymore and go off and not have to worry about the stress of being a CEO anymore. But you deliberately decided to take some time off to work on yourself. That's not very common. So, can you talk a little bit about what made you want to step back and what you wanted to work on because of taking that step back?
I think for me, it was not necessarily an easy decision because you have all these opinions flying around. It's like you need to climb the ladder, and this is just the stepping stone for the next big thing. And there's so many voices around you. And then also how society trains us. It's
Yeah.
like this image of a leader and how they look and what they do and what they achieve. It's very streamlined almost. We don't see all the multifaceted leaders that we have. So it's really a very straightforward, this is how a leader has to look and this is how they have
Mhm.
to function. I was really having high expectations towards myself, also in terms of how do I develop those people? And then also being in a company where you cannot develop everyone, that was a really bitter pill for me to swallow. This was also the first time I was confronted with that reality that not everybody will be able to make a step up, gain more skills, get a pay raise. So it was really understanding this and dealing with that was something that really took a toll on me. Something that I want to do for the rest of my life in that way, because I clearly struggle with it. Also, that I cannot give all of those things to everyone who's in my team. And then I took a step back and I went into a completely different role that was where I was just by myself as a subject matter expert. So I was like, okay, let's go back to the roots and let's just figure this out. But then also, like a year into this role, there were like things happening that were then again outside of my control in that sense. But I was suddenly thrown into teams that had no structure, and suddenly we came out with a structure. And I was like made the project lead of one of the three biggest projects of the company with all team members that did not report into me, but I still had responsibility over them. And suddenly we were on stage of the company because we had one of the most important projects and it had to work and you had to bring the team together. I also then decided to not just take on those challenges because I was really curious about what would happen if I do all those things. But at the same time, I also went back to school basically, and I really wanted to learn more about personal development and coaching and mentoring in that sense. And I got certified as a personal development coach. And I was also doing the work on myself while I was still in this corporate position. And this then really helped me to create that leadership image that I really wanted to have for myself. I understood it better because I knew where my feelings were coming from and I knew why I had such high expectations and I did all the work. This really helped me then to also bring this to teams and then also reshape that narrative of a leader for myself.
Mhm.
And it took a while, but I'm now quite comfortable with where everything is.
There's so much to unpack there. I love this. Going back to when you finally made the decision to step out of a leadership role and go back into an individual contributor role, Were you in an unhealthy place? Were you burnt out? What were you feeling? Was it that serious that made you say, I can't do this anymore? Or was it that you just weren't feeling purposeful or that the company wasn't the right company because it didn't align with your values? So talk a little bit about what was that precipice right there?
I think for me, the bigger part was that it's it wasn't it was affecting my mental health, of course, a little bit. I think about the people because you build relationships with them, and I cannot switch it off just on Friday at 5. But also, I felt it wasn't fun anymore.
Mm,
And if I do something 40, 50 hours a week, I need to have some fun. I'm not my personal best if I don't enjoy it fully. And I would say I enjoyed a lot of it, but then at some point it was more like an energy vampire than that fun part. I think that was the reason why I was like, okay, let's take a break and just take a deep breath and see what's next.
yeah, that's really good. So many people won't do that. They'll stay stuck in their unhappiness or not having fun because they're supposed to climb that corporate ladder. And when you look at what's really important to me, and if having fun in what I'm doing is a value and I'm not experiencing that in my work, then I need to make sure that I am aligning with my values. And so it took a lot of courage to make that decision because there's so much pressure to climb that ladder, to go up once you're a leader. Why would you give up that influence and authority?
Yeah, exactly. And I think not many people do. I just really want to enjoy the things that I do as well. And I knew that they can coexist, but not at that time.
Yeah, I understand. You've mentioned several times about your high expectations for yourself. How has that shown up for you in really positive ways and maybe not so positive ways?
I think it's my biggest superpower, but then also the pitfall that I experience
Yeah.
every now and then. So I think it has those two sides of the coin. I think the high expectations towards myself, they really push me forward. I see how I am able to make things happen that I never thought I could. It pushes me and gets me moving, and I get creative and I find solutions that I never thought I could find. On the other hand, it's also a little bit like this that sometimes the line gets blurry of what is my expectation and what is somebody else's expectation. I
Hmm.
think that was something that at that moment in time, I was not able to clearly distinguish that this is my thing and this is someone else's thing, especially when we had few new people joining teams and then you had different dynamics. Some people were really clinging on to you and listening to everything that you were saying. They were like, yeah, let's do it. That's the plan. And others were like, oh, yeah, she's talking again, right? Or others would even lie sometimes to just get out of a team meeting and stuff like that. You just have to navigate all those things where you're like, okay, this is my high expectation, but it's not necessarily something that can be copied to anyone else. And that's also something that I really had to learn. This was one of those things where it's either pushing me, but then also I need to take a step back from it.
Yeah. Mine in that sense was moving fast. I move so fast and I have the ability to handle so many things at the same time. And to me, I just thought that's how all people operated because that's
Yeah.
what you do. You see the world through your
Yeah.
lens, and it's not always easy to take a step out and say, okay, not everybody operates the same way I do. Early in my career, I just would make fast decisions. I was fine with changing. I could see the bigger picture and go, oh, that's what we need to do. And so many people couldn't keep up. And I got frustrated that people couldn't keep up, realizing that this is different for me. This is me, and I can't put my expectations on other people. That was a big leadership lesson that I had to learn that not everybody operates at the pace I operate at.
Yeah.
Not everybody can handle all of the things I can handle, and that's okay. We need all different kinds. And I have to really make sure that I'm modifying myself so that I bring people along for the journey. They feel like they can keep up and be successful, and they don't feel the pressure to move at the pace that I move.
I really love what you were saying about modifying yourself, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's about gaining that perspective of when you need to give a little bit less and when you need to give a little bit more. Especially if we go back to when you were hacked, you need to give a little bit more. That's like when it
Hmm.
comes in and it's so good that you can do all those things at the
Yeah.
same time. But it's really about modifying yourself, editing yourself and knowing when to do what.
And part of what I had to learn how to do is to take on other activities. So People always ask me, you're a CEO, you're running this company, but you write a book, you have a podcast, you do all these other things. I had to find other things to do to pour my intensity and my drive into so that it wasn't 100% focus on the company because it could not move at that pace. And it was
Hmm.
unhealthy if I tried to force it to move at that pace. But it was also unhealthy for me to not have a place to be able to put my creativity and my ideas. I mean, I remember at one point being so bummed out that an idea that I had, people were like, "No, no, we can't do it anymore." And I was like, "I can't have ideas anymore now. Oh, this is awful." And what I realized is not every idea has to be acted upon. Not every idea even has to be shared. How do I have an outlet to do other things so that way I can still feel like I have that ideation, that creative aspect to what I want to do, that I can make an impact and I can drive change, but I'm not
Yeah.
trying to drive it through my team. And it sounds
Yeah.
like that's what you did a little bit with taking on the coaching aspect. I can't make the impact that I want to make. So, how do I go and put that energy into something that can help me grow? Was it something
Yeah.
similar for you?
Yeah, exactly. And I knew that I had to do something, as
Mhm.
you say, modify myself. I think being trained as a coach really helped me with it, but also I had some really good mentorship along the way
Yeah.
that was just different to coaching, but it went really well together. And that
Hmm.
helped me to discover all these different facets. It felt like I was ready to shape myself, and both of these things helped shaping myself. It still is a very rewarding and exciting journey.
And I think what it goes to show is that the most important investment that you can make is in yourself. I think people don't recognize that or they wait to be tapped on the shoulder. And you said, I want something different. What I'm doing isn't fulfilling. I want to do it differently. So I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to learn these new skills. And I'm going to take a left when my career says I should take a right so that I can find fulfillment and purpose in my work. And
Yeah,
that takes a lot of courage. A lot of people won't do that. A lot of people are afraid to spend the money to go invest in themselves, or they're afraid to make that pivot because of the loss of salary or the loss of influence. And really, our happiness and fulfillment needs to be at the top of that list. But so
yeah.
often we deprioritize it because of fear.
Exactly. And I think that was also one of those learnings because now those two ways, when I had to turn left instead of
Yeah.
right, they now come together again, which is also very rewarding. And you should, at that point in history, you don't know that you will meet or the paths will cross
Yeah.
again. And I think I didn't want fear to hold me back. And I know that not everybody has the luxury to go back to school and do it, but I was really fortunate that I could do it even part time. I could have that sense of stability while still
Hmm.
working on that better version of myself. And that really helped me. And it was very demanding, of course, but it was worth like every minute that I invested in it.
And it's good to do hard things. It builds resilience and it really is the way to build a life. I absolutely believe that. I love your story and I'm so glad you came on and that we talked about this because I do think that so many people are afraid to take a step backwards to take a step forward. They see that step backwards as a step backwards, but really it isn't. It's just action. When you feel stuck, the only way out is to act, is to move, is to do something. And you empower yourself when you say, okay, I'm not happy. So here's a change I'm going to make. And it's going to lead to something different. And if it doesn't lead to happiness, I can make another change. And maybe it will lead to me feeling much more fulfilled in life. So it's just really great that you could come on and share this experience. And I hope that it inspires people who are feeling stuck, who feel like they should go right when they're going left, to have the courage to do it.
I hope so too. And if anybody is also looking for a helping hand or a starting point, I do have my own consultancy and we do have a lot of materials also available to just start off. It's not a huge investment that you have to take. You don't have to commit to 3 months of coaching. You can just also start yourself. And I think this is also what I really wanted to do, to empower people to take the first step themselves.
And how can people find that information if they wanted to explore or work with you?
I can, of course, be found on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. So if you just type in my name, you will find me. And for the rest, you can find me on ripemcc.com. That's the name of my company. We called it Ripe because we really want people to harvest their best self. And we hope that with what we have available, people can take that first step.
And I'll include both links to those in the show notes. Okay, to wrap up, my signature question is, what does reflect forward mean to you? So, what does reflect forward mean to you?
I think I have to circle back to that quote, right? Moving forward in a fearless way and being okay with only understanding it when looking backwards. This gives me also so much power, confidence in going into every new day because I also take the pressure off of the day a little bit. I don't have to understand everything right away, but it will make sense at some point. And I think that's also what this means for me.
I love that. It's so spot on. To just say, I don't understand why this is happening right now, but I trust that I'm going to, and that I'm going to be a stronger person. I'm going to learn from it. That is such a beautiful way to be able to reframe those uncomfortable moments that you're in when you have to make a tough decision or you're facing some sort of obstacle or have to make some big change in
Yeah.
your life. So, very well put. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have so enjoyed having you on the show, Marlena. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story. I am confident it's going to inspire so many people. So thank you.
I enjoyed it as well, and I think I really appreciated the chat we had.
All right, hang tight, everybody, and I'll be right back. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode. So much fun to bring people who have a different experience, a different perspective, and have done something really brave onto the show. With that, I will leave you for your week. If you liked this episode and you feel that someone could benefit from hearing it, someone who is thinking about making a career change but is a little bit afraid to do it, please share it with them. And if you like this podcast, please share it with a friend, subscribe to it on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform, and leave me a comment or write a review. I always appreciate the feedback and the shares. It helps spread the words of these amazing people that you would never get to know if you didn't listen to podcasts. With that, I will leave you for your day. Have a good one. We'll see you next week. Bye.